there, welcome to saas.unbound podcast. I'm your host, and Nadeina, head of growth at saas.group, serial acquirer buying wonderful SaaS businesses to take them to the next level. And here I chat with inspiring founders and experts to get an inside scoop on how they made their business success. And today with me here is Sebastian, co-founder and CEO of ContractHero, the all-in-one software for your contract management. Welcome.
Hi, Anna. Thanks for the intro. Thanks for the invite.
Absolutely. Great to see you here. So many questions I have for you. It's your first company and you have a pretty cool background. So let's start there. Where are you coming from and why you're building what you're building?
Yes, yeah. So my background is originally in sales. So before starting Contract Hero, I used to work in sales. The first station was in London back then, working for Bloomberg, selling the software part of Bloomberg, not the news part. And then pretty quickly, I realized that I enjoyed more understanding more the, let's say, the context of a business. I knew that I needed to get into a more generalistic position, which of course at a big corporate like Bloomberg wasn't possible, at least not that fast. So I moved to Berlin roughly 7 years ago. And I started in several startups, mainly focused on fintech, which was closest to what I was doing back then, and always in commercial roles. So I learned a lot about software sales. I learned a lot about also fintech and how startups do business. I had some time also in a marketing team in a relatively commercial role. And until the last station, which was roughly 2018, 2019, where I joined FinLeap, is a Berlin fintech specialized. Back then it was an incubator, today it's only a VC. And we discovered own business models internally and then founded the companies around them. So it was really like an incubator model. It doesn't exist like that anymore. But back then it was a lot of fun, especially for me, for being one of the first employees to start a company from scratch and to also get those really first-hand experiences of what happens actually when you prepare founding a company, when you prepare launching the first product, hiring the first team, and so on. And this is the place where then during the first year, I was always in contact with my now co-founder, Gary. We know each other for more than 10 years already. We did the social service, a German social service in South America, roughly 14 or 15 years ago in South America. And we always met once in a while and talked about everything, right? And also about business. And when I was at FinLeap, Gary was at Colibri Games. Maybe you've heard about it. Colibri Games was a big success story from Berlin, gaming company for mobile games. Gary used to be the head of finance and legal at that company, and they were preparing for an exit. Later on they sold to Ubisoft, French big gaming enterprise. And as you can imagine, preparing an exit of a company that size involves a lot of effort on the sell side first, because you have to get all your documents in order, you have to make a legal due diligence, you have to prepare the financial due diligence, and so on. Finance and legal, Gary was in charge of exactly that. And they weren't really prepared for that, right? When it comes to their specifically documents and their contracts. And it was a big hustle, to be honest. It took them like 3 to 6 months to prepare everything, to get everything straight and in order, so they can give it to the analysts, give it to the buyer, and get the due diligences done. You can imagine that during that time, Gary was a bit, let's say, frustrated, to say the least, of that process and of everything, the pain involved. And this is when they started browsing for alternatives. They've started browsing for a category that we didn't really think too much about beforehand, which is contract management and document management. And they did the typical Excel list, they compared different solutions and decided for one vendor, which was an American vendor back then, which was extremely expensive to start with, then also a bit clunky. It was on-premise, not really cloud. And end result was that after a long migration process, they never really used more than 10% of the features of that vendor. So this was at the time when we met and we talked about that. He talked about his pains, and we started digging into that category of contract management and found out that this is a really weird niche with a lot of vendors who claim to deliver on that purpose, but not really suitable for this, let's say, small and mid-sized companies. There's a lot of enterprise solutions, very heavy, complex solutions that require a lot of effort to get started with, but nothing really fast, nothing really intuitive. And this is, yeah, long story short, this is how we came up with the idea for what in the end is ContractHero.
No, that's really cool. I feel like it's almost one of the most important parts of starting something is like really understanding the pain and really kind of relating to it. So that's why I think some of the most exciting stories are those where founders actually started building for themselves. So I guess in a way that's your story too. So I guess you started talking about it a little bit already, but what was the biggest problem? What is the biggest problem that you're solving, and who's your ICP right now?
Gary was kind of the first ICP, right? He was the head of finance and legal, which is an ideal mix at a dynamically growing company, but let's say mid-sized company. It was like roughly 200 employees plus. The main problem all customers share is like solve several problems around contracts, documents, but the main problem that everybody shares is that usually when they start talking to us or we talk to them, is they don't have a clear overview of what's going on in the different business relationships they have with different stakeholders, which can be their vendors, which can be their customers, which can be their employees, shareholders, and so on. Because in the end, the rules by which we all play in the business world are written down in contracts, right? This is where the rules, the basic rules are set. Financially, legally speaking, compliance, which becomes bigger and bigger topic, and also due dates, renovation periods, and so on. This is the main problem. They don't have access to this information, even though everybody has contracts, right? And why is that? It's because the way that companies manage their contracts is that they don't manage their contracts at all. They just collect them, right? So majority of the bigger companies have processes in place to draft and create and sign contracts. But once the contracts are signed, what do you do with them? What's the process behind that? Who has ownership over those contracts, over those very important critical documents, right? And usually what we find is that they just get stored, hopefully, on a SharePoint or on their server or locally or even printed out. I mean, we're still in DACH region, so a lot of print is there as well. And that's of course very very hard if you imagine you being the CFO or head of finance or legal counsel of a company, and the entire different teams are creating new contracts, setting up new rules with new stakeholders, and you're kind of in the middle. You actually need to know these informations because they have impact on your cash management, on your forecasts, on everything, on your finances, but you don't get to the information. So that's the main problem that with ContractHero we tackle, and we've been tackling for 4 years now. And of course, ContractHero is becoming bigger and is solving more problems, is becoming more flexible, and has more jobs to be done covered. But the core is always dead. People or companies don't manage their contracts; they just collect them, and ContractHero gives them overview and access to the information they need to be able to work with contracts.
That's great. That's a very valid point. I started thinking Yeah, like how, because we have so many, obviously, like at SaaS Group with so many brands, and I wonder how we do it. Something to ask our CFO probably. But to, I want to come back to your personal journey a little bit, because as I mentioned already, this is your first company, and you have this clear vision. Like while you were talking, I was also thinking about the fact how, how focused you are on the problem that you're solving. And we often talk about common mistakes that first time founders make, like not niching down or building every feature that customers want, or like raising too much money too soon. Did you make any of those? Were there any common mistakes that you also fell for?
Yeah, I think we did a lot of mistakes, obviously. Of the ones that you named, probably not so much. So we didn't raise too much capital. When we started the company in 2020, remember that was like of the hype phase of venture capital. And our first fundraising round was 1.4 million, which back then barely made it to the news, right? It was like you had 10 of these every week only in Germany. In hindsight, I'm very happy about that, to be honest, that we didn't raise too much money in the beginning. And in general, to be honest, so from the start, we've always been very focused on growing efficiently, right? So we're a quite lean company. When it comes to sales, we have the luck or the advantage that that's my home turf, right? I've been selling software before. So we never even thought about hiring the first salesperson too soon in the process. So the first year, we've been a team of three. So Gary and I and our first employee, and the first 100 deals, yeah, the first 100 customers were all closed by myself. So in those first 100, of course, I got a lot of questions, I got a lot of feedback, I got a lot of no's as well, and I got a lot of yeses, and we could already start to see a certain pattern of what type of companies work well with us and what type of companies or what type of, don't work well with us. And this also led to the ICP not being really static, right? So the ICP changed throughout the past couple of years. And I think what's quite common is, and it also happened with us, the ICP grew, right? So in the beginning, we were just focusing on, let's say, the low hanging fruits, focusing on really quick deals, on also other startups, people we knew from our network, and who would just give us feedback fast. That was like the main goal in the beginning. And then over time, we learned where we have kind of our sweet spot of what's working well for us and where we want to dive deeper and develop further and get more jobs to be done for the customers. We learned it over time. And I think it was valuable for us to not have hired too many people too fast. We didn't do that because we didn't raise too much capital in the beginning. If we would have raised, I don't know, 5 million, then we would, of course, have felt the urge or the need to hire more aggressively. It's okay to do that, but only once that I know what works and what scales. We haven't reached that point in the past, so we weren't there yet. Now I would feel more comfortable about it.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I have a waterfall of questions for you. So, first of all, because you're coming from sales background, how does it help you personally, run the company? Because I think you running sales teams in the past. And, also one of the things that we often discuss here, and that's another mistake, kind of the common mistakes that founders make, is hiring the sales team too soon, or hiring the VP of sales when there are no salespeople just for the big title and kind of to figure out what it's going to look like. So, how did it work for you? How did you, again, taking into account your previous experience, how did you set up this process? How did you figure out how your sales motion is going to work? Let's start with the first one.
Yeah. How did it help me? I mean, I think it starts with the mindset, also the self confidence that we never even thought about hiring somebody for the job in the beginning. It didn't even cross our mind. I think we had enough confidence that if we are not able to sell our first version, the MVP, which was kind of embarrassing, then it doesn't make sense to hire somebody else. They would fail even more, right? And the principle that we followed was basically get feedback as fast as possible. We took this really by heart. The first MVP that we launched, it took us roughly 5 weeks to develop. Right, and you can imagine that 5 weeks it doesn't give you too much time to really go deep on the product or to build something that you're totally amazed by. It was only to kind of validate the initial idea, to validate the problem that we had ourselves, that Gary suffered for months with, and check if others have that problem as well, and find that problem big enough to pay money for it. And we were I think it was also great timing because it wasn't during the first lockdown, during the pandemic. It was, of course, I think we were a bit lucky there for sure, because people got used to doing Zoom calls and Google Meet and Hangouts and so on really fast, right? So we were talking to SMEs in Germany. They were used to being visited beforehand, so that came in at the right time for us. And that was always the most important part for us, to get feedback as fast as possible, even if it doesn't scale, or even if we don't see yet how we can close, I don't know, 50 customers per month with that. Because for us, it was in the beginning more important to get it right? And therefore, it helped a lot that my previous experience in sales, which is that sales is not about convincing people. Of course, you need to be able to pitch well and to get over the ideas clearly and communicate clearly. But what's even more important, and was important for us at that stage, is to ask the right questions. Is not only to scratch on the surface, but to really go deep in the discovery stage, to really go deep on understanding not only do they want contract management and do they have the normal problem, but also understand the consequences. What happens if you don't solve it? What happens if you stick to your SharePoint, recollect contracts? Is that a problem for you? If so, why? What are the consequences financially, legally, operationally? So it was important for us to do that very quickly. And it was also one reason why we very soon in the process decided against the product-led motion, which back then was very popular. So we didn't offer a free trial. We did that in the very beginning, but we switched to a demo path on our website because we just wanted to learn more and understand the problem more in detail, right? So I think that answers a couple of your questions.
What would you recommend to founders who want, because like you said, PLG has been ruling SaaS for a while, and still, we love PLG companies, but companies, businesses are moving up market, and a lot of companies want to add sales motion. What would you recommend the first steps to do right?
This episode is sponsored by Rewardful. Looking for new ways to find customers for your SaaS business? Consider building an affiliate program. Rewardful is the easiest affiliate tracking platform to set up, manage, and scale for SaaS companies. Building a successful affiliate program can be a little bit intimidating at first, and that's why Rewardful has taken what they've observed from their most successful customers' affiliate programs and distilled that into an exclusive online course. The exciting part? Their affiliate marketing course is absolutely free. Start the course at academy.rewardful.com. academy.rewardful.com. And turn your biggest fans into your best marketers.
I mean, it depends a lot. I can't say that PLG doesn't work in general. I just found out that for us, the other way is the faster way to learn. And that was always the highest principle: learn faster. So that's how we decided to do it. In the more sales-led approach, I think what is important from the start is don't do it for free. We learned that in the beginning as well, because the first pilots and so on, we offered them for free. Problem was that if it's for free, it doesn't have a real value to it. And on the customer side, it doesn't really have an urgency or priority. Why should I now spend time with this? It's for free, so I can do it. I have a couple of to-dos, and this is like on the last priority. I can do that whenever because it's for free, right? So I would say this is really important to start charging as soon as possible, even if you have the feeling that you're not there yet, that the product is not there yet, because that's part of the validation. You want to validate if not only if your product is there yet, but also if the problem is actually worth solving and worth paying for it. So I would say that in the more sales-led approach, the sooner you do that, the better. We got a lot of feedback in the beginning. We did expert interviews before we had anything in place to just find out more about the problem. And then we had these hypothetical questions, if there was a solution who could solve this and that, would you buy it? And then people say, yeah, sure, I would consider it, I would buy it. But the feedback of those people, in my eyes, is not worth not even a fraction of those people who are actually paying for it. It doesn't have to be much, but if they pay for it, they are officially a customer, and they will think about it very differently than if they were just hypothetically giving you tips. And they take things also more serious and also sometimes even more personal. They have higher expectations of you, which is great, because this then helps us shape the pipeline and shape the roadmap what we're going to build next and what we have to improve, so that we can help them solve their problems in a better way, right? So that's probably one thing that I would recommend to do as quickly as possible. Start really charging, right? Because if it's for free, the feedback that's only worth so much.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. Well, another question that popped up just right now, because you mentioned it a couple of times, is about jobs to be done. And, because you mentioned it, is it something that you're sticking to? Is it like the vision and the approach that you take with the product? Or, what is it for you?
Yeah, of course. I mean, we have some customers that have been customers for 3 years now. So we know them quite well. They know us quite well. They've also seen the development of the product. And we also winning new customers who are really fresh, who have different set of expectation. We are always focusing on what are their kind of troubles, what are they working with at the moment? What are they worried about? What are their goals? So we don't think too much in features, right? Because we know that buying software today's world is can be really messy, right? Because you go to, I don't know, you go to G2 and you compare all those different vendors in whatever category, and there's so many, and most of them claim to have the same set of features. So we try to drill deeper. It's not only about the feature, it's also about the circumstance. Because if, let's say, the head of finance of SME with 100 employees, comes and wants to learn what contract management can offer, and then the CFO of an enterprise with 5,000 employees that works globally inquires about contract management, they might be looking for a very similar set of features. So we have parity here, and it's not really helping us. But the jobs to be done are very different, and the circumstances and the context of the companies are very different. So that's why we always try to, it's also a big task of positioning. We always try to find out and become better at what are the jobs to be done for our ICP. How do they usually work? And what are their requirements when we talk about contract management? Because the common things that we've been doing for more than 3 years now is to enhance contract management more and more with artificial intelligence. Because one of the main breaking points in contract management, the way it was done before, is that the migration doesn't work. Because you have your current storages where you collect your contracts, and how do you move them now to your new system that you have so much expectations on? So we knew that the breaking point is already the migration. You need to help the customer migrate his or her contracts in the smoothest way possible. So from the start, we knew that no matter if the customer is big or small, we will help them if we are able to automatically analyze and interpret the contracts for them. So we automate the migration from their storage to ContractHero, right? This is something very common. Everybody shares that problem. When we talk to a small company, an SME with 100 employees, and they have one location, they only operate in the DACH market, for example, contract management is set up quite easily because it's relatively simple to also decide who gets access to which type of contracts, because contract management is also about compliance, right? It's critical information. However, if we talk about an enterprise or a holding company with several subsidiaries throughout different countries, things like who gets access to which type of contracts or to which type of subset of contracts is a much more critical question, right? So the features might be more or less the same, but the job to be done if you're the global CFO of an internationally operating enterprise and you want to create or set up a contract management that gives you access over all contracts globally in those different subsidiaries, it's a whole different story, right? So we try to understand better the processes around contract management and the context, because we know that this is what people are actually worried about and this is what the questions circulate around, and not so much on the set of features, which is in the long run, I think there will be more feature parity in all different SaaS categories because it becomes cheaper and easier and faster to just build and copy feature sets of others, right?
Yeah, that's true. Since you started talking about surveying DACH market and global market, that's also something I wanted to ask you about, because obviously I was doing my research and I went to the website and you have two versions. One is in German, one is in English. But then I started looking at your social media and the teams, and everything you put out there seems to be in German. So I had a bit of a question, like, are you serving German market still, or are you going after global? So yeah, what are you focusing on right now?
Yeah, so we at the moment are focusing clearly on the DACH region, right? The German speaking market, Germany, Austria, Switzerland. This is where more than 90% of our customers come from. Then the other roughly 10%, less than 10%, it's more a byproduct, but it's still working. And it ranges from Poland, France, the US, but we are very much focusing on the DACH region for now. Why is that? I mean, first of all, it's huge, right? The DACH region, when it comes to contract management, there's still so much to be done. And the market penetration is still a joke, to be honest, because the pie is still growing every year. And usually when we are in talks to new prospects, in talks to potential customers, it's not that they have their contract management solution in place and want to replace it with ContractHero. It's more that they don't have anything in place yet, right? That accounts to roughly 90% of the prospects we talk to. So the potential is still huge. And we want to focus here and become the clear number one for the DACH market, where we are well positioned to do that. Because if you think about it, there is not yet this clear category leader, right? At least in Germany, if you think of, for example, HR software, the clear leader would probably for the majority be a brand like Personio. But if you think of contract management, well, who is it, right? You don't know too many names in that space. Of course, you know ContractHero, but besides, you might think of a DocuSign, for example, right? Because we all know DocuSign from digital signatures. It's very related, right? But it's very focused on one specific section or part of the life cycle of a contract, which is the signature part, the preparing and executing of a digital signature. We are covering that as well. So what ContractHero does is classic contract management. This is where we started. And now also actually contract lifecycle management. So from the moment you draft a contract to the preparation and execution of a signature, to then actually managing and automating the contracts you already have in place. So yeah, long story short, we want to focus on the DACH market because we see there's a huge need. And right now, the pace is picking up and people are actually looking into this and want to increase their efficiency, right? And having overview of their contracts can have positive returns on their efficiency from money they save on due dates that they don't miss anymore, or in general optimizing contracts, renegotiating contracts, and canceling those they don't need. All right, so direct impact.
Yeah, absolutely. And you do have this calculator, like ROI calculator on the website, and
Yeah.
even went and played with it and just put like SaaS group information in there to see like what is going to show and like how, how much like I want to show it to somebody in charge. And yeah, I wanted to ask, first of all, because there are all kinds of calculators that acquirers create where you put your information and it gives you like a rough multiple and like how much your company is going to be worth. And every time we decide against it, against like building our own, because usually like it's not that simple, right? We just don't want to give people maybe wrong hopes or something like this. And the first question obviously is how accurate it is. And second, do you have any data of like how many people actually book the demo or, become the customers that end up on that page?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So for the first part, how accurate is it? Or what's the reason behind it? Of course, it's an approximation based on the hundreds of customers that we already have. Because with contract management, you need to know what contracts you have in place to be able to estimate the impact you can have by optimizing them. But first, you would need a contract management solution to be able to tell which contracts you have in place. That's the thing where the ROI calculator can help, because it helps prospects who are interested in the solution and who are aware of the problem. So it's at a certain stage, top of funnel, middle of funnel in the buyer journey, to think about it and to get some inspiration of what contracts they actually have in place. So we give you the option to select the ones that you're most focused on, and it shows you the impact, the direct impact it can have to start optimizing and to managing your contracts. And people usually overestimate the amount of contracts that are actually important to them, but they usually underestimate the value attached to the contract, right? So we give them the clarity over this, and the ROI calculator is just something that you can start testing and get a more or less estimate of what this can be. And of course, it can help you if you're the champion who wants to pitch internally. It can help you to explain to your boss why it should be a good idea to consider ContractHero, right?
And do you have any data of like customers,
Yeah.
users from that page?
Yes, the way we look at it is that the typical buyer journey in B2B SaaS is not this straight line. First of all, I see an ad, then I go to the ROI calculator, and then the next step is I book a demo, right? So there's a mix of people who choose to calculate their impact in different stages. Some of them do it in the awareness stage, but some of them do it after they have already booked a demo, right? As a follow up, when they start, hey, this is actually very helpful. This is exactly what we need. Now I need some ammunition so I can pitch it internally, right? So I can't give you a clear number where I say if SaaS Group would use this calculator, they would have an impact of XYZ more leads, at least not now.
Okay. All right. That works anyway. So I just have a couple more questions for you. The usuals here. So far, 4 years, you've been testing different markets, you've been raising investment and winning new customers. What has been the biggest win and the biggest failure?
Great question. Biggest win, I think it's a combination. The biggest win is in the beginning, Gary and I, both of us, we are not technical co-founders, but the expertise we had was that Gary was the ideal customer profile from the beginning. So we had first-hand knowledge of not only the category, but also about the pain involved and the usual jobs to be done. So this was very helpful. Plus my experience from knowing how to close deals. But what we were missing was this technical part, right? Because software company, we have architectural needs, UX wise, also high expectations. And in that scenario, the biggest win was that we found our CTO roughly 1 year after starting the company, Toby. And he's like the totally home run that we found him, because he's like this, like extremely experienced, 20 years plus of coding experience, who has already founded and sold his own company roughly 10 years ago. So he's this like really SaaS veteran who gives us like this self-confidence when it comes to the technical aspects and to the compliance aspects, where we can now be really self-confident and say we have enterprise grade security on our platform, and we can not be compared to other startups. We can be compared to companies out there who've been around for 20 years, right? So, and we also one of the very few contract management solutions out there that are fully ISO compliant, and this is also thanks to our CTO. So I would say this was a huge win early in the days that has defined the way that the time afterwards developed, and is a big part of our success for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Any failures? Learnings?
Biggest failures. I have so many failures, but all of them resulted in learnings. So we didn't hire salespeople too fast, that's for sure. But in the beginning, we weren't really experienced with recruiting in general, right? So in the beginning, we took a couple of decisions that we later on regretted. We could fix them quite fast, but we've shaped and improved a lot the way we recruit and the way we think about how a team should look like, especially how a team in an early stage startup should look like, right? And there's a lot of detailed learnings, but bottom line, we've become much more picky, right? So in the beginning, like the first 1 year roughly, we were really a bit too excited to start hiring people, that we just wanted to get it done, that we just wanted to be with everything that we do too quick. And later on at ContractHero, I read about, I think it's a principle from Amazon, which is the differentiation of type 1 and type 2 decisions. I'm not sure if you heard about it, but basically a type 1 decision is a decision that is really hard to revert. For example, hiring somebody or fundraising, you're doing an equity round with a VC, there's really no way back, right? Once you've done it, that's the path you go down. And there's type 2 decisions. Type 2 decisions are really easily to revert. For example, if you want to change a different headline on your marketing website, you can do that within 5 minutes, right? So the best practice goes that if you have a decision to take, you think first, is this a type 1 decision or is it a type 2 decision? So if it's a type 1 decision, you really, really take more time that you feel is right. You take even more time than that. And you really think it through with all the pros and cons and so on. And you talk to all the different stakeholders and you do your homework, etc. Because it's almost impossible to revert, or very hard or painful to revert. And if it's a type 2 decision, you skip all that and you just do it, right? So at ContractHero, we don't discuss whether we should have this headline or this headline. We just set up an A/B test. It takes us like 3 minutes, and we do a split test, and we run the test, and in 2 weeks we will have the answer. So we win a lot of time here. But to other decisions, like for example recruiting, we now, and this is the learning we had, we take much more time. Of course, recruiting is, you can revert it. right? You can let go people, but it's painful. It can be painful for you. It's costly. It's painful for the team and for the person. So we consider this being more a type 1 decision. So we think much more about it. This is probably one of the most important learnings we had, where we took some wrong decisions in the beginning that hopefully won't happen to us again, and where we say we take much more time than we used to take the right decision, right?
Yeah. This is usually the part where founders talk about the team, and, either the team is the biggest win or there have been mistakes that they want to avoid now with hiring or something related to culture. So very common, very interesting, especially since, when we buy companies at saas group, we try to take the hiring process away from them because, well, there are not too many people who enjoy this, let's just be honest. So we try to just do really good job doing it right. But the last question I have is about a hack, and that almost qualifies as a hack, but let's try to come up with another one. But anything, that works magic can be the smallest thing ever that helps you either, identify those people that are the best for the company, or identify the jobs to be done and position the product, anything.
Something that I think is important, that is a principle for us, especially like for companies when they are, because I talk to a lot of people who are in between. Should I go the VC way or should I go another way? I think due to the tough fluctuations of the past couple of years in the VC market, from total hype, everybody wants to get in, to it's getting more rough. I feel that new founders are wondering, what's the right way for me? What's the right path that I should go? Because they kind of know it's a type 1 decision, And for us, what has been very helpful to think about that, but also to other big decisions when it comes to developing the company further, is that the most important thing is optionality. The most important situation where we want to be in is always a position of strength, always a position of optionality, which means that I don't do fundraising because I need to do fundraising. If I go fundraising, it's because I want to and because I think it's in the best interest of the company and it's a very good moment to do so, right? And it's the way that will bring us further in the best way. So we try to live by that, to always have optionality and to always bring ourselves into a position of strength where we can take decisions, where we can take big decisions. And I feel that many people I talk to, they go down a path, or they go down, let's say, also, is it PLG or is it sales led? They once say it's PLG and then it's PLG, no matter what, and they stick to it. Where I say, okay, but we are building a company. This is not about beliefs. This is not a religion, right? You need to be opportunistic. You need to be also versatile. You need to adjust to new situations. And this is probably one thing that I would always keep in mind. And it helps us a lot to keep in mind that we are not religiously following the sales path or following the VC-led path. We always look at the different options that are out there. And then we always need to think, what's the best way for us? And what can we experiment? And what can we test? Yeah, I would say this is something, a mindset thing that helps us a lot and probably can help others as well.
Honestly, this came at a very right time, I guess, because I just had a conversation with another founder, and he was just talking about it, and how, like you said, religiously listening to the loudest voice out there that tells you this is the right way to do startups and this is how it should be done and this is, otherwise you will not succeed, and how
Mm.
listening to this leads a lot of founders into burnout and depression and just a lot of mental load. And how it's great to have optionality and do your own understanding what is the game that you're playing. So thank you for
Yeah.
reminding that. And thank you for the story. I feel like, you have such, a mindful and like sustainable approach to this, just listening to you. It really seems like you guys have a lot of things figured out. Thank you so much for telling your story. It's fascinating. And you're right. I don't know any other contract management system in DACH in particular, maybe globally. So there you go.
That's the mission, right? To make
Yeah,
this change.
true. All right.
Like,
Thank you so much. Happy to do it again sometime and see where you're at next year. Otherwise,
let's do that.
thanks for your time.
Thanks, Anna, for the invite and the talk. And yeah, talk soon.
Sure. And take care.
That was yet another awesome conversation on saas.unbound. We're always looking for new guests to share their experiences. We mostly talk with bootstrapped SaaS founders, and if you're one, reach out to me directly at anna@saas.group or find me on LinkedIn. If you're not bootstrapped or even not SaaS but have a great story to tell, we want to hear from you too. And obviously, saas.unbound wouldn't be possible without the SaaS Group, a founder-friendly private equity company that buys awesome businesses that people love to take them to even greater success. If you're thinking about selling your company or just exploring your options, feel free to visit saas.group, fill in the form, and expect a response in under 24 hours.